Why? Hello and welcome everybody. Also, good morning. Fun fact, today's actually my birthday, turned 33. With that being said, if you guys saw the Legacy of Phrecia event announcement that GG posted a few days ago, I am here to bring you guys my Bog Shaman Righteous Fire build. Couple things to state. This is not a beginner-friendly build. This is not a budget build, and it's not going to have the same hand-holding as my RF Chieftain, because that's a lot of work to put in for an event. Furthermore, the reason I'm not playing Scavenger this go around is because I didn't really like how Scavenger felt in the previous league, or the previous Phrecia event. It felt like a budget chieftain, and genuinely, like, I want to try something kind of unique. So here we are playing a life stacking Bog Shaman Righteous Fire build. Now, let's get into why we're playing Bog Shaman versus anything else. Number one, Toad Pact gives you 50% AoE, which is really nice and actually has a lot of synergy with two unique things we're going to use. Number two, the skill effect duration does add some nice quality of life, and the minus elemental res is only elemental and not chaos. In fact, you actually get chaos res from the Ascendancy nodes, so it's not that big of a deal. In fact, Alira gives you, I think, 15 Ellie res in the campaign, almost completely eliminating this downside for 1 point for the campaign purpose. Number two, Pandemic. 40% more damage over time is welcome to all Righteous Fire builds that need damage, which is unfortunately every single Righteous Fire build. Number three, you have the endgame pivot of life stacking with Sanguine Power, which can scale your character to however many mirrors you want to put into it. If you look at the DPS on the left here, we have a reasonable amount for our RF. It can shoot up much higher, but again, this is a pre-Mage Blood version, so here we are. By simply unclicking Sanguine Power and Pandemic, you can see all of our damage goes away. And the last one is Vile, whatever you want to call this, I'm just going to call it Vile, is a really nice node because it basically means enemies that are essentially around your circle have 10% reduced damage dealt and 10% increased damage taken. With that being said, you do have flexibility of taking Bloodline Ascendancies, such as the Breachlord one. So instead of taking this, you could get 15% physical damage mitigation, 15% fire damage mitigation, and 8% maximum life. So you have some flexibility with the last point. I suspect progression is going to look like this, and then we'll take the Breachlord one, and then when we start life stacking, we can plug in Sanguine Power and choose if we don't want this, right? So I plan on going this way, right, into this, and then this one last. Now, you'll notice my tree looks very different from a regular RF Chieftain, and for people who want to follow along with the path of building, down at the bottom, you can select the version. You want to select 3.26 alternate so you can see the blood or the Phrecia Ascendancies. Now, this character has a lot going on. I'm not sure if we start with the tree or the itemization. Let's first start with the Toad Pact thing we were talking about. Now, the fact that this gives you 50% AoE, let's talk about why that's a big thing. In Path of Exile, specifically when you're in the end game, and when I say end game, I don't mean red maps, I mean your gearing. When you're coming down to the point of when you're making these difficult decisions and trying to figure out what is better to stack, opportunity cost, etc., this is where Toad Pact comes in. And here's why. Increased damage on the passive tree is the #1 most all over the place, right? Doesn't matter what you're doing. Increased damage is everywhere. But if you were to type in more, you'll see there's a lot less, and a lot of the things that are highlighting are keystones or masteries here. With that being said, we are building around this item, which will be very expensive, called Foulborn Wrathpit Globe. It gives you 5% increased damage over time per 100 player maximum life. So if you have 20,000 life, that's a 1,000% increase. When you have a 1,000% increase, you essentially don't really need to take increased damage anymore, right? So why does that synergize with Toad Pact? That synergize with Toad Pact because first off, we're not pathing to any AoE nodes anymore because we're not trying to grab the increased AoE because we also don't need the increased damage, right? So we're not going for Amplify and we don't need Blast Radius, for example, right? So that's #1. #2, this build is utilizing Adorned. You can tell because of the amount of jewel sockets. With that being said, you don't need Adorn to play the character. I can come in here right now under the build and I can just remove the Adorn jewel and you will see that it still functions. I'm missing 1 max res, which I can get back. I lose a lot of my damage. Life is still reasonable, but of course you would be using better jewels if you weren't using Adorn. So Adorn is not required, which is what I like, but it is very big for pushing your damage. Now, more reason on Adorned. We have our increases solved with Wrathpith, and Adorned fixes our dot multi, because you get increased effect of your magic jewels. And the reason why this is important is, number one, our magic jewels are filled with damage over time multiplier and maximum life. You need maximum life with a build like this because using Sanguine Power, we are stacking Energy Shield, converting it into base life, and then increasing it with sources of increased life. Then we get very rare stats, such as on the Life Mastery, you can get a Life Mastery for 10% more maximum life if you have at least 6 Life Masteries. So you get base life from Sanguine Power, you get increased maximum life from Adorn stacking, and then you get more life with the Life Mastery. There's another source of a multiplier, which is Blood Magic, but I want to say Blood Magic is for after you get Mage Blood, because our Fizz Max hit is actually pretty reasonable right here, and taking Blood Magic would destroy this because we would lose some auras. I want to talk about that. That's more for min-maxing. So now that you get the idea of why we want Adorned, and why we want the Wrathpith, and why we're playing this build. So, let's talk about the next big thing. To get high energy shield gear, we need to craft on the highest bases, such as Lich Circlet, Twilight Regalia, Warlock Gloves, Warlock Boots. The downside here is we need a crap ton of intelligence. Unfortunately, intelligence doesn't give you life, so we don't really want intelligence. Instead, we opt out for a Legion Keystone called Elegant Hubris. This is where I say the build's not beginner friendly, and here's why. The build is going to have strange progression where you can clear the campaign no problem, you buy an Immortal Flesh, you completely cut off the downside of Pandemic, because 5% life loss when you have 2k doesn't really matter when you're brute forcing 300 flat life regen from Immortal Flesh, but as you push it into Endgame, you're going to be mapping with like 4 to 5k life, and you're going to be kind of squishy. You're going to be like a worse chieftain with better single target. Then you're kind of going to get stuck until you can craft gear for your Sanguine Power, right? Once you craft gear for your Sanguine Power, your Immortal Flesh doesn't help you anymore because now you have like 12,000 life, and now you need increased life recovery. The other downside is not only is your sustain bad, you don't have the proper defensive layers like a chieftain. We're not wearing a Cloak of Flame, and we don't have 90 max res. That is where the sustain comes in with Defiance of Destiny. Now, thankfully, we're not going to need Defiance of Destiny, because if you've played my RF Chieftains, you can do a block-based setup to go budget, and you can kind of see a block-based budget setup right over here, where we're pathing like normal, right? This is definitely like the more, I'm not going to call it SSF because we're not playing in SSF, but it's the progression route, right? Where you're going to use something like this. Now, going back over to Supreme Ostentation and Elegant Hubris. The purpose of this combination is to eliminate the need for attribute requirements. This makes it so attributes literally don't cost any, like you don't need attributes for anything. However, you don't get the inherent bonus, and that's okay. That's okay because we get so much life from Sanguine Power that we don't care about the bonus from Strength. And here's why we're at an advantage for doing this, right? Number one, this means we get to freely tattoo the whole board, right? So tattooing the whole board, if you look over here, we have sources of reduced effective shock because I'm not running Tempest Shield. You can easily get a few of these and then run a flask for full shock immune, or you can just run 10 of these for full reduced effective shock. Alternatively, you can run full, whatever you want to call this, turtle tattoos to get 100% crit damage reduction in synergy with the armor mastery. So you're looking at a pretty stable character. And on the strength nodes, you can tattoo 0.3 life regen per second all over the place, which will help essentially cancel out the downside of Pandemic. For people who want more damage, you could do 5% increased fire, but I think that's a waste, so we're not doing that. You can litter this whole thing. And then, if you guys played RF Chieftain in Keeper's League, you'll know about the really nice Foulborn Red Dream, which makes it so we can stack fire res within this radius to get maximum life on those baby nodes as well. It's not going to count in PoB, but if you read it, passives granting fire res or all res in the values also grant 75%. And I actually just realized I'm not sure if this is counting as a life node. Is it counting as a life node in here? Maybe it is. Yeah, as long as this is counting it, it's fine. If not, I'd have to go put it in the config because I don't have anything in the config yet. I guess we could easily check this. Oh yeah, it is. It is counting the life. Good. It's counting it. So that's where we get that. And then again, on the rest of the nodes here, you can see that we're just stacking life regen. Now, some other things that come with the build that's really nice is you have the option of running an Unnatural Instinct in this location to get 36% AoE as well. So you get the 50 from Toad Pack, and you get the 36% here, plus you can run Awaken Increased Area of Effect. So we're looking at a Righteous Fire that's hitting a pretty large part of the screen before any min-maxing of Adorned, right? So if I toggle on the Righteous Fire here, and we just go ahead and look at the radius, you can see it's pretty hefty. It's not bad. Like, it's a pretty chunky area on it, and I'm pretty happy about that. So let's go ahead and talk more about the items. So Void Scepter could be Opal if you want. You're looking for thick dot multi, and then you can just craft an increase. If you want to go all out, you can try to slam for Malevolence effect, but just something reasonable. This is recombinated. Foulborn Wrathpith required for pushing endgame content and is a pillar in life stacking. Lich Circlet, we're looking for triple T1 prefixes. You can find this from the tree. A lot of the time what's going to happen is people are going to try to get the best bases from the tree. You're going to end up hitting like T1%, T1% energy shield, T1% flat, not T1 flat energy shield, and then people will get like a life roll of like 140. And they're going to sell that for dirt cheap a lot of the time. Don't quote me there, because they're looking for those perfect prefixes. So you can always just replace the hybrid with a life roll, and it is still okay. Right? Twilight Regalia, you're looking for the same thing. Big energy shield. Warlock Gloves, you're looking for the same thing. If you happen to have open suffixes, it's not a bad idea to craft the life regeneration rate to help with your sustain, because that's really nice. Now the boots in the like mid game, Legacy of Fury is actually a really nice contender here for clear. Oriat's End is going to be very expensive early on, whereas Legacy usually falls in price pretty quickly. With the bonus AoE we're getting, Legacy should probably, it's not going to mimic the Chieftain Explode by any means, but it's going to be a very big bonus to single target clearing. Not single target, sorry, but like clearing in general, having like a mob pop and then have the debuff on the rare, and then the rare just dies, right? So that's where that's really nice. But you have the option of going Warlock Boots later if you want more life pool. Defiance of Destiny we spoke about, very good piece. When you're running this much maximum life, Defiance of Destiny is effectively our form of recover on block, but all the time ramped up on steroids. That is why I chose to go with this. Of course, if you want something like a more damage-oriented approach, you could go for like a Simplex, but that's going to be very expensive. Cogwork Ring, virtually the same way as crafting the RF Chieftain Ring, if you guys have watched the videos. The only issue here is I don't really like this because we're stacking increased damage, and we don't really need that. So I want to see if there's another way I can go about doing something else, but I've looked at all the essences, and I don't know what exactly we want. If you don't understand how to craft this, it is expensive. I'd go watch my YouTube video on crafting the Cogwork Ring. Essentially, you're looking to fill up your resistances here with a big life roll and a dot multi. The increases are not the end of the world at all. Like, I would honestly maybe rather craft minimum frenzy instead of getting like a fight, like the increased damage, but I'm not sure how to go about doing that. It gets a lot more expensive when you have to start using veiled currency. Calandra's Touch, so you only craft 1 Giga Ring and mirror it. Until then, you're just going to run standard rings like Amethyst Rings for Chaos Res. Vermilion Ring is not bad because of the increased life. The same exact Stygian Vice the regular RF build would run. The only difference is you don't really care for the flat life regen. It's much more important for you to get the life recovery alongside the increase in the flat. So it's actually easier because the flat regen's not as big. Again, when you have 20,000 life, 100 life regen doesn't do anything, whereas percent life regen does. And if you want an example, if you allocate a 0.6 life regen node, you get 200 flat life regen. That's an example of how you don't really need to value the flat regen as much now. Going in more to the items, we've got a jewel here. Effectively, it's just corrupted blood immune with a life roll. That saves you a point on the tree. You know, that point could be added onto a 5% life node, which is why I prefer that. As for your flask, it's pretty standard. Gain charges when hit, like you can see like right here. And then you want like the 3% regen along with 15% damage taken from hits as leech. If you have Mage Blood, you get to put on a Ruby, you get 9 max fire res, and you get to redo a lot of stuff, so that's a big plus. If you want Explode, you can use Oriaths. You've also got space for unique flasks, so you can kind of like go and do whatever you want with the flask setup. I'm definitely going to run Topaz and Sapphire because I want to boost these. When you go Mage Blood, you can also go Melding and hit 90 all. Oriath's End is our, is what we want for our Explode. I want to say that late game, I would rather use Oriaths and not have to run Legacy of Fury because, you want to stack life essentially. You don't really want Legacy, but we'll figure out how that goes later. As for graphs, you've got some options here. Now, I'm using a 2% max res graph because the prefixes don't matter that much. I don't care about increased damage. I don't care about, all the other modifiers. The max res in my eyes is the best. Since this is going to be expensive early, just go with whatever you can find. If you don't have the Foulborn Wrathpith, you can get fire damage. The big reason for this is the cover in Ash, and all you have to do is tap shield charge, and you can cover in Ash that way. Now, one thing to note is in this variant, you actually have two choices. You can run Scorching Ray or Fire Trap, and they're identical damage. If you look down here, you can see 12.9 full DPS on like 12.9 mil. This is currently with Scorching Ray, and I don't actually have Infusion on. Infusion turbocharges are max hit, which is kind of cool. If you happen, for example, to drop Scorching Ray, so let's just uncheck Scorching Ray here, completely disable it. We're at 7 mil. Go to your Fire Trap, which is here. Enable Fire Trap. Okay, then over here, we have to tag Ignited, and we're also going to tag Cover in Ash. We're 12.9. It's the same damage. The reason you tag Cover in Ash here is because you don't have as much uptime on channeling, so you can tap your shield charge to trigger the Cover in Ash, which comes from your Zolf graph. Now let's do a flip back here. The advantage Scorching Ray will have is you are going to be tankier, and you are going to be able, for the most part, you're going to be able to actually stand and tank boss mechanics. But one other thing to note here is with Scorching Ray, when you're using Foulborn Wrathpith, whenever you use a skill, right, you're going to lose 10% life. So every time you throw a fire trap, you're losing a lot of HP, right? 2k HP. Scorching Ray only pays that life up front on the initial channel. So this is one thing that's probably going to push me more to Scorching Ray. And the other bonus is that if you are using Scorching Ray and you kind of min-max your defenses a little bit, so you don't need to run the 2 max res here, you effectively get 3 extra life nodes. And the reason why is because the graph you can see here is 15% max life on the Ulnatul ones. So Scorching Ray actually kind of wins here. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to lean more towards Scorching Ray. So that's one bonus. The life would go even higher. Now, let's talk about our jewels. So I'm just running standard basically 3 notable jewels. You don't need to run these. You can take whatever combination you want. The reasoning on this combination I have, and there may be other combinations, is just because you get Widespread and Burning Bright. So 8 AoE plus, 6 AoE is what, 14? 14 times 3 is like, I don't know, let's just say 40. So you get another like 40% AoE from the cluster setup, which is kind of nice, right? Like really nice because you run the triple cluster. So that's one benefit of that. You can just run blank clusters with any modifier and you're fine. Now, going on a little bit further in, we talked about the Unnatural Instinct. Here is the Rational Doctrine. Rational Doctrine is a crazy amount of life regen. You can see here what our life regen is currently at. Removing it drops, I guess, hold on, I'd have to uncheck the Consecrated Ground here. Removing it, we lose a shit ton of life recovery. Now, Rational Doctrine is very expensive, but thankfully there is a temp fix. You can just take Brink of Death. It gives you so much life regen, so you don't really have to worry too much, and we'll talk about low life here shortly. So for people who want to be more on the budget, you don't need the Doctrine. It's important to note this because Sustain will be a little rocky at the start until you start getting the HP up to outscale the degen, right? Which comes with 90 max res and etc. So going back to the calcs, let me just check the Consecrated Ground again. Where did you go? I'm kind of blind. Bam. All right. We have our Adorn Jewels. We talked about why we're going for these specifically. Now, one thing to note is I am using one Adorn Jewel, specifically, actually 2 Adorn Jewels, with the maximum fire res roll. This maximum fire res roll does get rounded up from Adorn to 3, so we're at 6 max res from the jewels. You need a minimum 86% Adorn to buff the 7% nodes. Again, that's one thing to note. Now, we talked about the Elegant Hubris, so we pretty much covered everything on the jewel side. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the skills, and really I think the last thing to talk about is the low life setup. Now, we have we have opted for low life for a specific reason. We get access to Brink of Death early, right? And Petrified Blood synergizes really well with Defiance of Destiny. Gain 24% of missing unreserved life before getting hit by an enemy. So because a lot of our life pool gets reserved because of Petrified Blood, when a mob tries to hit us, Defiance heals us a shit ton. Furthermore, we effectively get like an extra aura. I guess you don't technically get an extra aura, but I just think it synergizes well with Petrified Blood. We still have all of our normal stuff, but we get Malevolence, we get Purity of Fire, we have the Petrified Blood set up here, and then we have access to Flesh and Stone and Vitality, which I put on Arrogance, which hits us to 56% unreserved life. I don't remember if that's going to cause an issue. I don't think it does because we can't regen above it, but if it does, we can always fix stuff out or fix some stuff. Now, the other benefit to doing this is on our graft here, the Ul graft. I don't remember what it's called. I think it's called Tender Embrace. This doesn't show it very well. Tender Embrace effectively says like when you're missing life, it goes off or something like that to basically boost your recovery, and it'll automatically generate endurance charges for us. So endurance charges are solved by going low life, and we get a recovery multiplier, which is not being shown right now, for being low life. So there are advantages for going low life, which is very, very nice. I suspect if we have over sustain, we could even remove Hardy, get another 3 points back, which would be super good. I got a life node here, I got a life node there, and I got 2 life nodes there. Each life node we allocate is giving us 200k DPS alongside max hits and bonus max life. Like that's 230, right? Everything kind of starts to scale really nicely when you start actually setting up the life stack. Other than that, I think we're pretty much good. I will say there is one thing that we could change. Also, you should be able to actively use Vol Righteous Fire. Due to the skill effect duration we have and Defiance of Destiny with big life recovery, you should be able to click the Vol Righteous Fire button, which should be a very nice button to press. We got the standard Frostblink Shield Charge gameplay. I will state that this is currently running a double curse, and you do have to manually press both of them, which may be a turnoff for some players. I'm here to save you though, so don't worry. If you actually look at our skills in here, our flammability, for example, lasts 23 seconds. So when you're fighting a boss, it's not like you need to piano your buttons, right? The second thing to state is we are using an Enlighten in this setup, but it's not required. So currently, you can see we have Malevolent, sorry, not this one. Yeah, right here. Malevolence, Purity of Fire, and Petrified Blood with Enlighten. If you happen to replace this, so say you take the boots, and you put the boots on, where's our weapon 1? Our weapon 1, like this. And then you take the flammability setup and you put it on the boots, right? We can put Bane in here, which will lower our damage. But what Bane is going to do is Bane is going to allow you to freely curse with one button instead of having to cast both. But you do lose some curse effect. And then for the weapon 1, you can remove the Enlighten. You'll get hit with the reservation error. But you can simply take these 2 nodes here, remove that, and then drop a life node. And now you're double cursing with one button press, and you don't need the Enlighten. But you do a little bit less damage. So I just wanted to kind of create some options. Again, speaking from the beginning, though, the build's not really going to be beginner or budget friendly. You'll see me streaming the build, and I'll probably make videos on it talking about my progression. But I don't really plan to make a handhold guide because I don't know, it's kind of just burning me out right now, and I don't even know how it's going to work with like a hypothetical character like this, right? Anyway, that's pretty much about it. Hope you guys enjoyed the build. If you did, as always, feel free to hit that like, share, and subscribe. And you can catch me streaming live every day but Sundays at twitch.tv/Pohx. within the next few hours, I will publish this character on my website. You can find at Pohx.net. So you're just going to see it probably right over here, like most likely in the box right here. So you can just see it. Make sure, again, if you are trying to like do stuff on here, you have to change your POB to 3.26 alternate if you want to see them. If you import, it might straight take you here. So that's one thing to note. Anyway, catch you guys all later. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed.